Hey guys, in today's video, I bring you a surprising story. Zane Ashford died, and, during his near-death experience, he saw Queen Elizabeth's soul in hell and discovered a dark pact that will shock you. What he witnessed on the other side will shake everything you believe. Before we start, leave your like, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell so you don't miss any of our stories. Get ready, because this revelation is chilling. My name is Zane Ashford, and the story I'm about to tell you has completely changed my life and my perception of reality. Before all this happened, I was an ordinary young man from New Orleans, skeptical and disbelieving of anything that couldn't be explained by science. My life revolved around parties, friends, and the search for intense experiences. I used to laugh at people who talked about spirituality or the afterlife. For me, all of this was nothing more than fantasies created by fragile minds that could not accept the finiteness of existence. That fateful night, I went out with some friends to a local bar. It was a lively place, with loud music and a relaxed atmosphere. People around us laughed, danced, and enjoyed the night without any worries. I was in my element, feeling the adrenaline of youth coursing through my veins, believing I was invincible. After a few rounds of drinks, one of my friends offered me something different. It was a powerful anesthetic that he said would help ease my anxiety and intensify the experience of the night. I knew the risks of mixing substances with alcohol, but at that moment, my arrogance and desire for more excitement spoke louder. Without thinking twice, I accepted. Little did I know that that impulsive decision would be the catalyst for a journey that would challenge everything I believed to be real. Within minutes, I felt my body react in an alarming way. My vision began to darken around the edges, as if a black veil was being pulled over my eyes. I felt my blood pressure plummet, and an intense cold spread through my body. The lights in the bar started to spin, the voices around me distorted, and then darkness. I fell, unconscious, to the floor of the bar. It was at this moment that my near-death experience began, taking me to places and revelations I could never have imagined. What followed would forever change my understanding of life, death, and everything that exists beyond the veil of our everyday reality. When I regained consciousness, I was no longer in the noisy New Orleans bar. I found myself suspended in the air, floating in an environment so vast and grand that my mind could barely comprehend it. I was in a colossal coliseum of light, a structure so imposing and majestic that it made my heart race with awe and awe. The Colosseum stretched in all directions, far beyond what my eyes could see. Columns of pure light rose for miles, supporting a ceiling that seemed to touch infinity. Luminous staircases snaked through the space, defying the laws of physics I knew. Each step shone with its own intensity, as if it were made of condensed stars. The light permeating the entire room was something I had never experienced before. It was no ordinary light, but a living, pulsating energy that seemed to have its own consciousness. It was dancing around me, reflecting colors I didn't even know existed. It was as if each beam of light was a prism, breaking down into thousands of shades that blended and separated in a cosmic ballet. The most impressive thing was the feeling that place gave me. Unlike the chaos and anxiety I felt in the bar moments before, there I was enveloped by a deep peace and a sense of absolute security. It was as if every atom of my being was in perfect harmony with the universe. I felt full, complete, as if I had finally found my true home. As I floated in this sacred space, I realized that my perception had expanded. I could feel every vibration of the Colosseum, every pulse of energy. I was no longer limited by my five senses. It was as if I could see, hear, feel, and understand everything simultaneously. It was then that I noticed four beams of energy forming in front of me. Three of them had an ethereal, almost childlike quality. The room, however, was strangely familiar to me. As the beams took shape, I recognized it with a jolt of emotion. It was Brendan, my best friend who had died in a car accident 6 months earlier. Brendan and the three children, for I now knew they were children, didn't speak, but I could feel a deep, intuitive communication flowing between us. They weren't words, they were feelings, concepts, and truths that transcended language. They gave me a clear message. Everything was okay. I could relax, accept, and let go. In that moment, I felt a connection to something much bigger than myself. It was as if I were part of a cosmic web, interconnected with all existence. For the first time in my life, I experienced a feeling of absolute belonging, as if I had found my place in the great puzzle of the universe. The experience at Colosseux de Luz was just the beginning of my journey. I had no idea that I would soon be drawn into the depths of a dark realm, where I would face disturbing truths about power and corruption. But in that moment of light and connection, I felt ready to embrace whatever revelation the universe wanted to show me. While I was still absorbing the magnitude of the Colosseum of Light and the comforting presence of Brendan and the children, I felt a sudden and dramatic shift. The light around me began to retract, as if it was being sucked away by an invisible force. The feeling of peace and fullness that enveloped me was quickly replaced by an intense cold and a feeling of crushing weight. It was like I was falling, but not physically. My consciousness was being pulled downward, plunging into an abyss of darkness. The contrast with the bright environment I had just experienced was shocking. As I descended, I felt scared for the first time since starting this journey. What was happening? Where was I going? As I sank into this new dimension, the air around me became thick and heavy. It was as if the atmosphere itself was filled with suffering and despair. Darkness was not just the absence of light, but seemed to have a tangible, almost living quality. It moved and writhed around me like shadows with minds of their own. When I finally landed in that new realm, I was shocked by what I saw. The environment was a distorted mirror of the Colosseum of Light. Where there had once been columns of brilliant light, now stood pillars of darkness that seemed to suck away any shred of hope. The ground beneath my feet, or was it my consciousness, felt unstable, as if it might crumble at any moment and drag me down to even darker depths. Indistinct sounds echoed around me, moans, whispers, and muffled screams that seemed to come from every direction and nowhere at once. The atmosphere was oppressive, filled with sadness and regret so deep I could almost touch it. I wanted to run away, go back to the comforting light of the Colosseum, but something kept me there. It was as if I needed to witness something, learn a crucial lesson before I could move forward. Then, in the almost impenetrable darkness, I saw a figure form before me. At first, it was just an indistinct silhouette, but little by little it gained clearer contours. When I finally discerned who it was, I was stunned. There, before me, was the soul of Queen Elizabeth. But it wasn't the majestic, imposing image I knew from photographs and public appearances. This version of the Queen has been stripped of all earthly power and glory. His face was a mask of agony and despair. The eyes, once a symbol of authority, were now opaque and lost. She seemed disoriented, as if she didn't understand where she was or why she was there. As I watched in astonishment, a soft light began to form beside me. From it emerged an ethereal figure that I can only describe as an angel. His presence brought slight relief to the oppressive surroundings, like a beacon in the midst of a merciless storm. The angel addressed me, his voice reverberating not through the air but directly into my consciousness. He revealed a shocking truth. Queen Elizabeth, during her lifetime, had made a pact with evil forces to maintain her power and influence. This pact, the angel explained, had a terrible price. His soul was now doomed to wander this dark realm, trapped in an endless cycle of regret and suffering. This revelation shook me deeply. How could someone so revered, a figure who symbolized tradition and nobility, have succumbed to the temptation of power to the point of compromising his own soul? It was a harsh lesson about the consequences of our choices, about how even the most powerful are not immune to corruption. As I absorbed this disturbing truth, I felt the environment around me begin to change again. The darkness was beginning to lift, and I knew my journey through this dark realm was coming to an end. But the lessons I learned there would stay with me forever, shaping my understanding of the true meaning of power, morality, and the eternal consequences of our actions. The revelation about Queen Elizabeth left me stunned. As I was pulled back to the Colosseum of Light, My mind was buzzing with questions and reflections. How was it possible that such an iconic, respected and seemingly righteous figure could have made such a dark pact? What did this mean for the world I knew? All my life, I had seen the British monarchy as a symbol of tradition, stability, and nobility. Queen Elizabeth, in particular, was seen as a beacon of duty and public service. Discovering that behind this facade was a deal with evil forces was more than shocking. It was devastating. This revelation made me question everything I thought I knew about power and influence. How many other leaders, public figures, or people in positions of authority would have made similar pacts? Was the world I knew an elaborate illusion, with hidden forces pulling the strings behind the scenes? More than that, I began to reflect on the nature of morality and the choices we make. What drives someone to sacrifice their soul in exchange for earthly power? Was Queen Elizabeth fully aware of the consequences of her actions, or was she somehow deceived or coerced? The image of the Queen lost and suffering in that dark kingdom was engraved in my mind. It was a powerful reminder that our actions have consequences that reach far beyond this life. The power, fame, and wealth she enjoyed in life seemed insignificant compared to the eternal torment she now faced. This experience also made me question my own life and the choices I had made up to that point. I had never been a particularly spiritual person or concerned about moral issues. My life revolved around immediate pleasures and personal satisfaction. But now, faced with the reality of a spiritual plane and the idea of eternal consequences, I felt small and foolish. I realized that there was a spiritual battle going on, much bigger and more significant than any earthly conflict. It was a struggle between light and darkness, between choices that elevate the soul and those that corrupt it. And each of us, no matter how insignificant it may seem, was an active participant in that battle. As I absorbed these revelations, I felt a huge weight on my shoulders. The knowledge I now possessed was both a gift and a burden. How could I go back to my normal life knowing what I now knew? How could I look at authority figures and not wonder about the dark secrets they might be hiding? At the same time, I felt a growing responsibility. If I had been chosen to witness these truths, there was certainly a purpose to it. Perhaps my role was to share this knowledge, to warn others about the consequences of their choices, to inspire a search for a higher and more meaningful existence. As I was transported back to the Colosseum of Light, I knew nothing would be the same. The innocence and ignorance I once had been irrevocably destroyed. But in its place was born a determination to live a more conscious life, more aligned with higher principles. The journey through the dark realm and encounter with the tormented soul of Queen Elizabeth had shown me the true price of misused power. Now, as I returned to the realm of light, I was eager to understand more about the purpose of this experience and what it meant for my life going forward. When the darkness finally lifted, I found myself once again enveloped by the radiant light of the Colosseum. The contrast was so intense that for a moment I was disoriented. The oppression and despair of the dark realm gave way to an almost indescribable sense of relief and comfort. The light around me seemed to pulse with a life of its own, as if it was welcoming me back. The vibrant colors and majestic structures of the Colosseum now had a deeper meaning for me. I saw them not just as beautiful manifestations of energy, but as symbols of hope and redemption. Brendan and the 3 children were still there, their energy beams glowing with a comforting intensity. Although there were no words, I felt a wave of understanding and empathy from them. It was as if they knew exactly what I had witnessed and were offering me silent comfort. At that moment, I was overcome by an overwhelming feeling of unconditional love. It was a love that transcended anything I had ever experienced on earth, pure, non-judgmental, and infinitely compassionate. I realized that this love was the true essence of the universe, the force that united all existence. While floating in the Colosseum, I noticed that my perception of time had drastically altered. What seemed like hours or even days of experience could have been just seconds in the physical world. The linearity of time that I knew did not apply there. Past, present, and future seemed to coexist in an eternal now. In this state of expanded consciousness, I began to receive an immense amount of information. It was as if the universe itself was opening up to me, revealing its deepest secrets. Truths about the nature of reality, the purpose of existence, and the interconnected fabric of the cosmos flowed through me. I learned about the journey of the soul, about how each life is an opportunity for growth and evolution. I saw how our choices and actions create waves of energy that spread throughout the universe, affecting not only our lives, but those of everyone around us. I understood that the duality I had experienced, the light of the Colosseum and the darkness of the Dark Realm, were not opposing forces, but complementary parts of a greater whole. Both served a purpose in the grand cosmic plan, offering lessons and opportunities for growth to souls on their eternal journey. The revelation about Queen Elizabeth gained a new context in this expanded understanding. I saw that her story was not just a warning about the dangers of power, but a reminder of the responsibility that each of us has in our choices. Each decision we make takes us closer to the light or the darkness, and it is these accumulated choices that shape our spiritual destiny. As I absorbed these cosmic truths, I felt a profound transformation occurring within me. My old self, skeptical, materialistic, focused only on immediate pleasures, seemed to be dissolving. In its place, a new consciousness was born, one that understood the interconnectedness of all things and the importance of living with purpose and compassion. Yet even in the midst of this expansion of consciousness, I felt like my time at the Colosseum was coming to an end. A part of me wanted to stay, to continue exploring these infinite truths. But another part knew I had a mission to fulfill back in the physical world. When I realized I was about to return, I was overcome with a mix of emotions. There was sadness at leaving this realm of light and knowledge, but also a renewed determination. I knew I was being sent back for a purpose, to share what I had learned and make a difference in the material world. With one last look at Brendan and the children, I felt a rush of gratitude for everything I had experienced. Then, slowly, I began to feel my consciousness being pulled back into my physical body. The return journey was about to begin, and with it, a new chapter of my existence. The process of returning to my body was an intense and, in many ways, painful experience. After experiencing freedom and expanded spiritual state, returning to the confines of my physical body was like trying to force the ocean to fit into a cup of tea. At first, I felt tremendous resistance. It was as if my body and soul were at war, each reluctant to take the other back. I began to feel physical sensations again, but in an amplified and almost unbearable way. Every nerve felt like it was on fire. Every muscle protested the return of consciousness. As I reconnected with my body, I was flooded with a cacophony of sensations. The strong smell of alcohol and sweat from the bar, the deafening sound of the music and voices around me, the rough texture of the floor beneath my back, it all hit me at once, threatening to overwhelm me. Opening my eyes was a monumental challenge. The artificial light in the bar, which before I had barely noticed, now seemed blinding and aggressive. My eyes burned and watered, struggling to adjust after having witnessed the ethereal glow of the Colosseum of light. My entire body shook, as if in shock. I felt intensely nauseous, my stomach churning in protest at the sudden reintroduction to physical reality. My head was pounding with a pain that felt like it was splitting my skull in half, as if my brain was struggling to process everything I had experienced. Breathing was a conscious and painful effort. Each breath felt insufficient, as if my lungs had forgotten how to function properly. I panted, trying desperately to get enough air into my lungs. Little by little, I began to make out the shapes and faces around me. My friends were there, their expressions a mix of fear and relief. I also saw members of the bar's security team, some of them still in first aid positions. Their voices reached me distorted, as if they were speaking underwater. It was at that moment, still struggling to reorient myself in the physical world, that the words escaped my lips. I saw Brendan. The statement came out as a hoarse whisper, but it was enough to silence everyone around me. The shock on their faces was palpable. After all, they knew that Brendan had passed away months before. I tried to sit up, but my body felt like it weighed tons. Each movement was a Herculean effort, as if I had to relearn how to control my muscles. Gentle hands helped me into a semi-reclining position as someone pressed a glass of water to my lips. Water, something so common and something I had never paid much attention to before, now had an almost sacred taste. Each sip was like a reconnection with earthly life, anchoring me back to physical reality. Little by little, my vision began to stabilize, and I could see more clearly the worried expressions around me. Friends I had known for years seemed strange now, their earthly worries and fears so far removed from the cosmic vastness I had just experienced. I tried to speak again, to explain what had happened, but words failed me. How could I describe the indescribable? How could I translate the universal truths I had witnessed into human language? At that moment, lying on the floor of a noisy bar, surrounded by worried and confused faces, I realized the enormous challenge that lay ahead. It wasn't just the physical reconnection that would be difficult, but also the emotional and mental reconnection with the world I had left behind. The journey back to normal life was just beginning, and I knew nothing would be the same again. The Zane who had walked into that bar hours ago was no more. In his place was someone forever changed by the glimpse of the afterlife he had received. The days following my near-death experience were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions and sensations. I woke up in the hospital the next day, still feeling the residual effects of the dangerous mix of alcohol and drugs I had ingested. But the physical consequences seemed insignificant compared to the internal turmoil I was experiencing. My mind was constantly churning, trying to process everything I had seen and felt. The images of the Colosseum of Light, the Dark Kingdom, and Queen Elizabeth's tormented soul replayed incessantly in my head. I oscillated between moments of crystal clarity, where the cosmic truths I had learned seemed perfectly logical, and periods of total confusion, where I doubted the reality of my experience. The world around me felt different, like I was seeing it through a new lens. Colors seemed more vibrant, sounds clearer. I noticed details I had never noticed before: the complex pattern of leaves on a tree, the symphony of sounds on a busy street, the subtle interplay of energies between people. Sleeping became a challenge. Every time I closed my eyes, it was as if I was transported back to the Colosseum of Light. Part of me longed for that reconnection, but another part feared that if I gave myself over completely, I might not want to return. I spent sleepless nights, staring at the ceiling of my room, trying to reconcile my new perception of reality with the material world around me. My relationships were also affected. Friends and family noticed the change in me but didn't know how to react. Some expressed concern, fearing that the incident had caused neurological damage. Others were skeptical when I tried to explain what had happened, dismissing my experience as a drug-induced hallucination. I felt profoundly alone, carrying knowledge that seemed impossible to share. How to explain the inexplicable? How could I convey the magnitude of what I had experienced using mere words? At the same time, I felt an overwhelming urgency to do something with this knowledge. The revelations about power and corruption, symbolized by Queen Elizabeth in the Dark Kingdom, tormented me. I wanted to shout to the world, warn people about the consequences of their choices, but I didn't know where to start. I began searching for information about near-death experiences, devouring books and articles on the subject. I found that many aspects of my experience were shared by others who had been through similar situations: the feeling of leaving the body, the tunnel of light, meeting deceased loved ones. This brought some comfort, a confirmation that I was not alone, nor crazy. However, some elements of my experience felt unique, particularly the encounter with Queen Elizabeth's soul and the revelations about power and corruption. It made me question whether I had a special mission, whether I had been chosen to share a specific message with the world. My habits and interests have changed drastically. I completely gave up alcohol and drug use, feeling that they were obstacles to the spiritual clarity I now sought. I began meditating daily, trying to recapture that sense of cosmic connection I had experienced in the Colosseum of Light. I also turned to spiritual practices that I would have previously dismissed as superstition. I began to explore different religious and philosophical traditions, looking for parallels with my experience. yoga, tai chi, metaphysical studies. I opened myself to it all with a curious and receptive mind. As the days turned into weeks, the initial intensity of the experience began to lessen somewhat. However, its impact remained profound and indelible. I knew I had been fundamentally transformed and that my life would never be the same. The challenge now was to find a balance between the transcendental knowledge he had acquired and the practical demands of everyday life. How to live in the material world with awareness of the spiritual. How can I use the lessons I learned to make a positive difference? These questions became the focus of my existence, guiding me on a journey of self-discovery and purpose that would continue in the months and years to come. The near-death experience had not been the end, but rather the beginning of a new phase of my life, a life illuminated by the light of the beyond, but firmly rooted in earthly reality. In the months following my near-death experience, I became immersed in an obsessive search for answers and meaning. I couldn't just go back to my previous life as if nothing had happened. The revelations I had were too great to ignore, and I felt an almost physical need to understand more, to contextualize my experience within a larger framework of understanding. My search has led me to explore a wide range of disciplines and traditions. I spent countless hours in libraries and bookstores, devouring books on near-death experiences, quantum physics, philosophy, comparative religions, and spirituality. Each new piece of knowledge I acquired seemed to open up a universe of new questions. Particularly intriguing to me was the question of time. During my experience at the Colosseum of Light, I had experienced a completely different perception of time, where past, present, and future seemed to coexist. This led me to study physical theories about the nature of time, from Einstein's ideas about relativity to more esoteric concepts of quantum physics. The revelation about Queen Elizabeth and the pact with evil forces also tormented me. I began researching extensively on the history of the British monarchy, looking for clues or patterns that could corroborate what I had seen. I immersed myself in conspiracy theories, studies of power and corruption, always trying to discern the truth amidst the sea of contradictory information. My search was not limited to just books. I started participating in support groups for people who have had near-death experiences. Hearing others' accounts was both comforting and disconcerting. While many aspects of their experiences echoed mine, the feeling of peace, the encounter with deceased loved ones, the expanded perception, no one seemed to have witnessed anything like what I saw in the dark realm. This uniqueness of my experience sometimes made me doubt myself. Had I really seen what I thought I saw, or had my mind somehow fabricated this part of the experience? These doubts led me to explore psychology and neuroscience, seeking to understand how the brain processes extreme experiences and how the mind can create narratives to make sense of the inexplicable. At the same time, I began practicing meditation and other consciousness-expanding techniques, hoping to recapture that sense of cosmic connection I had experienced. I explored spiritual practices from diverse traditions, from Zen Buddhism to shamanism, always searching for that spark of recognition, that sense of truth that resonated with what I had experienced. One of the most impactful discoveries during this search was realizing how many ancient traditions and spiritual philosophies spoke to concepts that I had directly experienced. The idea of a unified field of consciousness, the interconnectedness of all things, the illusory nature of linear time. I found echoes of these ideas in texts that were thousands of years old. This led me to question the nature of knowledge and revelation. Were these truths always there, accessible to anyone who delved deep enough into their own consciousness, or were there special moments, like my near-death experience, when the veil between the worlds grew thinner, allowing glimpses of these higher realities? As my search deepened, I began to notice subtle but profound changes in my everyday perception. Moments of synchronicity became more frequent, meaningful coincidences that seemed to point to a greater order underlying life's apparent randomness. I began to have vivid, prophetic dreams, sometimes waking up with insights that seemed to come directly from that source of cosmic wisdom I had experienced. However, the more I learned, the more I realized how much I still didn't know. Each answer he found seemed to generate a dozen new questions. It was like I was trying to map an infinite ocean, always discovering new depths to explore. This relentless search for answers sometimes left me exhausted, both mentally and emotionally. There were times when I felt overwhelmed by the vastness of the unknown, by the magnitude of the issues I was dealing with. At other times, I felt an almost euphoric excitement, as if I were on the verge of a great discovery. Little by little, I began to realize that perhaps the goal was not to find all the answers, but to learn to live with the questions. True wisdom, I realized, was not in having all the answers, but in keeping an open mind and a receptive heart to the infinite possibilities of the universe. This realization brought a new balance to my search. Even as I continued to explore and question, I learned to embrace mystery, to find beauty in the unknown. My near-death experience had shown me that there was much more to reality than what we can perceive with our limited senses or comprehend with our finite minds, and so, my search for answers turned into an ongoing journey of discovery and growth. Each new day brought the possibility of new insights, new connections, new ways of seeing and experiencing the world. Life had become an ongoing spiritual adventure, and I was just beginning to unlock its infinite mysteries. The near-death experience was not just an isolated event in my life. It was the catalyst for a profound spiritual transformation that completely redefined who I was and how I saw the world. The Zane who emerged from this experience was fundamentally different from the skeptical, disbelieving young man who walked into that bar that fateful night. The most immediate and obvious change was my new belief in a reality beyond the physical. I, who had previously ridiculed any notion of spirituality, now found myself deeply convinced of the existence of a spiritual plane. It was no longer a matter of faith or belief. It was direct knowledge, based on my own experience. This new spiritual perspective has manifested itself in many ways in my everyday life. I began to see the world not as a random collection of separate objects and events, but as an interconnected web of energy and consciousness. Every person, every living thing, every inanimate object, everything seemed to be part of a great unified whole. My attitude towards life and death has also changed drastically. Death, which I previously viewed with fear and as the definitive end, now seemed more like a transition, a passage to another state of being. This didn't mean I no longer valued life. On the contrary, I came to see every moment as precious, every experience as an opportunity for growth and learning. One of the most significant changes was my new understanding of power and personal responsibility. Queen Elizabeth's vision of the Dark Kingdom had shown me the devastating consequences of abuse of power and moral corruption. This led me to closely examine my own actions and motivations, always asking myself whether I was acting in a way that uplifted my soul or degraded it. This new ethical awareness extended beyond my personal life. I started to get more actively involved in social and environmental causes, feeling a responsibility to make a difference in the world. The interconnection I had experienced at the Colosseum of Light made me understand that the well-being of each individual was intrinsically linked to the well-being of the whole. My spiritual life has blossomed in ways I never would have imagined before. Prayer, which I once considered a useless superstition, has become a vital part of my daily life. They were not prayers in the traditional sense, directed to an external deity, but rather a way of tuning into that universal energy that I had experienced. Meditation has become an essential daily practice. Through it, I sought to reconnect with that state of expanded consciousness that I had experienced during my near-death experience. Although I was never able to fully replicate that experience, meditation provided me with moments of deep peace and clarity that helped me navigate the challenges of everyday life. My spiritual quest has led me to explore various religious and philosophical traditions. I found wisdom in Buddhist texts, in the practices of Sufism, in Vedanta philosophy, in the esoteric teachings of Christianity. Rather than sticking to a single doctrine, I learned to see all of these traditions as different paths to the same universal truth. However, this spiritual transformation was not without challenges. Many of my old friends and acquaintances had a hard time accepting the new Zane. Some accused me of having gone crazy. Others thought I had joined some kind of cult. I had to learn to navigate these relationships with patience and understanding, accepting that not everyone would understand or accept my new perspective. Professionally, there were also significant changes. My old job, which was mainly focused on material gains, no longer satisfied me. I felt a calling to do something more meaningful, something that aligned with my new spiritual understanding. I ended up leaving my previous career and dedicating myself to work involving healing, counseling, and spiritual education. One of the most profound lessons I learned on this journey was the importance of balance. While my near-death experience had shown me transcendental realities, I was still living in a physical world with its own demands and realities. I learned to find a balance between the spiritual and the material, the transcendent and the mundane. As the years passed, my spiritual transformation continued to deepen and evolve. Each day brought new lessons, new insights, new opportunities for growth. The near-death experience had been just the beginning. The real work was integrating that transcendental knowledge into every aspect of my everyday life. Looking back, I see how that night at the bar, which could have been the end of my life, ended up being the beginning of a spiritual journey that continues to this day. Each day, I am grateful for the second chance I have been given and for the privilege of being able to share the lessons I have learned with others. My story is a testament to the transformative power of spiritual experience and a reminder that there is much more to reality than what our eyes can see or our minds can comprehend. It is an ongoing journey of discovery, growth, and most of all, love. Love for the universe, for all life, and for the infinite mystery of existence. As I reflect on my journey from that fateful night at the bar to the present moment, I marvel at the depth and extent of the transformation I have experienced. The near-death experience was not just an isolated event in my life, but a turning point that completely redefined my existence and my understanding of the universe. One of the most profound lessons I learned was about the nature of reality. Before, I saw the world in strictly materialistic terms. What could be seen, touched, and measured was all that existed. Now, I understand that reality is much vaster and more complex than our physical senses can perceive. There are layers upon layers of existence, dimensions beyond the physical, that are constantly interacting with our material world. This expanded understanding of reality brought with it a new appreciation for life in all its forms. Every living being, every object, every particle of existence now seems to me imbued with an inherent sacredness. I see the interconnectedness of all things, the cosmic dance of energy and consciousness that permeates the entire universe. My perspective on time has also changed drastically. Before, I lived trapped in a linear view of time, always chasing the future or regretting the past. Now, I understand time as a more fluid and multidimensional construction. I learned to live more fully in the present, recognizing each moment as a unique opportunity for experience and growth. The revelation about Queen Elizabeth and the dark forces of power taught me valuable lessons about ethics and personal responsibility. I understood that every choice we make, every action we take, has consequences that extend far beyond our immediate understanding. It has led me to a more acute awareness of my own decisions and their potential impact on the great fabric of existence. Perhaps the most profound change has been in my understanding of love and compassion. The love I experienced at the Colosseum of Light was something so vast, so unconditional, that it completely transformed my view of human relationships. I learned that true love is not a limited or conditional emotion, but a cosmic force that unites all existence. This new understanding of love led me to a deeper compassion for all beings. I see now that every person, no matter how lost or corrupted they may seem, is fundamentally an expression of that same divine energy that I experienced. This does not mean that I accept or condone harmful actions, but it allows me to see beyond the actions to the divine essence that resides in every being. My experience also gave me a new perspective on the purpose of life. I no longer see existence as a random series of events or a search for personal satisfaction. Instead, I see life as a journey of spiritual evolution, an opportunity for the soul to grow, learn, and expand. Every challenge, every joy, Every interaction becomes an opportunity for growth and transformation. However, this new perspective did not come without its challenges. There were moments of profound loneliness when I felt disconnected from the normal world around me. Moments of doubt when I questioned the reality of my experience. Moments of frustration as I struggled to translate the transcendental truths I had experienced into practical actions and understandings in the everyday world. But each challenge, each moment of doubt or difficulty, only served to deepen my understanding and strengthen my resolve. I learned to embrace uncertainty, to find comfort in mystery. I realized that I didn't need to have all the answers. In fact, the beauty of life is in its constant evolution, in its eternal unfolding. Today, years after my near-death experience, I still feel like a student, always learning, always growing. Each day brings new revelations, new opportunities to apply the lessons I learned on that journey beyond the veil. I share my story not to convince or convert, but to offer a different perspective, to open a window into possibilities that many may not have considered. If my experience can bring comfort to someone who is struggling with questions of life and death, or inspire someone to explore the depths of their own consciousness, then I feel I have served an important purpose. In the end, my message is simple. There is more to existence than what our eyes can see or our minds can comprehend. We are all part of something much bigger, all connected in a cosmic fabric of love and consciousness. Each of us has the potential to experience this truth directly, to touch the divine that resides within and around us. My near-death experience was an awakening, a call to a more conscious, more compassionate life, more aligned with the universal truths that underpin all existence. It is a journey that continues every day, every breath, every moment of consciousness. And so, I end this story not with a final point, but with reticence. Because the story continues, the journey is eternal, and the mysteries of the universe are infinite. May we all find the courage to explore the depths of our own consciousness, to embrace the mystery of existence, and to live each moment with love, compassion, and an openness to the infinite potential that resides within each of us. If you liked this beautiful spiritual testimony, leave a like, comment on your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to activate the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.